Hey everyone, it's John Carella, one of the co-creators and executive producer of Dance Moms. This week on Dance Dad with John Carella, we have Brian Recker, a former evangelical pastor, a social media influencer, a writer, and a dad. We discuss the patriarchy, what real masculinity is, and how we can help men. Are you ready to be bold and be fierce? Please welcome to the stage, Brian Recker. Well, welcome back to the podcast, Dance Dad with John Carella. And this is for all you dance dads out there. I am looking in front of me here with another dad. Although I feel it says you're a dog dad. Correct, Brian?
I'm a real dad. I'm a dad of many.
Oh, okay. You are. But you're not a dance dad.
Dog dads aren't real dads in their own way. I don't want to diminish that. But I'm an adoptive dad. I've been a foster dad. I'm a biological dad of 3 and a dog dad. So all kinds of dads.
So with that, we have dog dad, real dad, not a dance dad yet. Never know.
I mean, I'll dance. What makes you a dance dad? How do you become a dance dad?
One of your kids has to compete and dance.
No, I don't. So I'm not that.
Yeah.
I'm a dad who occasionally dances, I guess.
Okay. We definitely have a new realm of dance dads. But so I have Brian Recker here. He's a former evangelical pastor, a writer, and as we have said, a dad. And, when I was, and the listeners of the podcast definitely know that I brought Reverend Dawn on. She's from Dance Moms. She was a dance mom. And ironically, she's a reverend. So my love for Jesus. So when I was kind of sitting on what we're going to talk about and why I brought you on, because you're bold and fierce. I feel that as a straight white man in what you say, and is how to help men similar to you that are feeling scared to get out of this patriarchy, this system. So I guess that would be my first question is, no, we're going to start with these other questions because you're a part of this community now. Is there 4 questions? How are you feeling? Where do you feel it? What color is it? And what is it saying? So Brian, how are you feeling right now?
Well, I just had a cup of coffee. So I think I'm feeling excited and a little energetic.
Okay, good. Excited, energetic. I'll do it with you too. How am I feeling? I'm feeling excited and a little nervous. Excited because you're here and nervous because that's what happens when I record a podcast with somebody I don't know. And where do you feel it, this excitement?
I think right here, mid-chest.
Okay. I feel mine in my throat. Yeah, upper throat. So if it was a color, this excitement, what would it be?
I'm going to say blue, although I don't know that I've done this exercise enough to be good at discerning the color of my feelings. But that's what feels blue. But not a ironically, energetic blue, a happy blue.
No, you know what?
That's what's going on.
It could be that. It could be psychosomatic, but the color of blue, after I got baptized years ago, I kept seeing the color blue, and it means spirit. So I like that you chose that. So the color of excitement and nerves for me is like, and I don't want to say this right now, unfortunately, because of all the sadness that's in the air in Los Angeles, but it is like a fire, red, orange of this excitement and nerves. If this excitement that you feel in your chest that's blue was going to speak, what would it say right now?
I think I don't know. It depends where we go in the conversation, I guess, because I'm just excited to talk about all kinds of things. So I think it says like, yeah, let's do it. Let's get into it, I guess is what it's saying.
So let's get into it. How do we help men, Brian?
Oh my God. What a question. An important question. Something I think about a lot. the men have a problem. We've got a problem with the men. Seeing like Zuckerberg the other day saying, workplaces aren't masculine enough. And I'm like, what are we talking? Are we living in different worlds? And it does make me think, I was thinking about this. I said this in the reel that I posted yesterday, that for a lot of people, I think masculinity is defined by dominance. And so even the idea of equality is threatening to masculinity, because equality obviously is not dominance, right? So to have equality for men who find their masculinity in being dominant, to be equals is a threat to their masculinity, because they need to feel that aggressive dominance in order to feel like real men. So you can't have equality if that's our definition of masculinity. And I think a lot of guys, they feel insecure because they don't feel dominant. I don't think most guys feel dominant. I think most guys feel weak.
Because they don't, you said because they don't feel dominant, they feel insecure.
Right. So they feel like they're not measuring up as men, because they have a rubric for masculinity that says they're supposed to be these alphas, these dominators, and they don't. They feel weak. They feel like, well, they're under capitalism, right? They can barely pay their bills. They're scrambling by. They don't, a lot of men, more and more guys are getting, they're not starting families. They don't have the lives that they necessarily want. They feel like losers. And then they're angry because they also feel like they're not the men that they're supposed to be, because they're not dominating other people. And we have the wrong metrics. We're looking for success in the wrong place. What if we weren't finding it in this sense of domination, but actually in a sense of pursuing mutuality and equality and community and connection? And how do we get guys to look for that instead of that need to dominate? I don't know what the magic bullet is to fix the guys. These conversations are important. We need to be talking about it. I think those of us who have voices in public platforms can try to present other ways of being men. I'm as a dad of boys. I have 3 little boys. I'm trying to teach them that, that men can feel and that they
and
can.
Who I should say, where do, first of all, I grew up, I know the system of straight men because I grew up a young boy, in that I knew I was always feminine and scared, definitely, straight men. I always say that there's nothing more that scares men than a feminine young boy when he walks in the room. That is frightening to them.
Why do you think that is?
I will say, and I've said this before, I think because it's femininity. It's actually tied to women. Ironically, it's not tied to even sexuality. I don't think, in my opinion, a lot of straight men have issues with homosexuality, the actual act of it. I think it's the femininity that scares the crap out of them. Because
they don't know how to
you
relate
tell me,
people. And so when you have a man who's presenting in ways that remind them of femininity, I think they're really confused, because a lot of men don't like women. They're attracted to women, but they don't like them.
Are they now? Were you taught? Are men taught that? Were you taught that? Or were you taught that?
I was never taught, but you're not supposed to like women. I think I was taught the superiority of masculine traits and dominance. Even within Christianity, I grew up in fundamentalist Christianity, and even in more mainstream evangelical Christianity, they'll say men and women are equal in value, but they'll say they're different in roles, and that men have the roles to be more like leaders and that sort of thing. And depending on what, there's different levels of it. Obviously, there are some evangelicals that are more egalitarian, but honestly, even more egalitarian-minded evangelicals probably still have a little bit of this at some level, this hierarchical thinking and this sense that men are more engineered to lead and they're supposed to be the leaders, and women are more engineered for homemaking.
What does egalitarian mean?
So in a theological context in the church, complementarian is the position that men and women are different and they complement each other, but that men are meant to lead, women are meant to follow and help. Egalitarian is the idea of more of an equal playing field, that we're all called to do different things, and that, a man can stay at home with the kids, and that's not a slight on his masculinity, and a woman can go out and earn that bread, you know? So that would be more the egalitarian mindset. And there are evangelical churches that are that, but I would say that's pretty rare. And like I was saying, even the ones that have a little bit of that, like for instance, if you have a woman pastor, that would be the egalitarian. I'd like to see the numbers on this, but probably the majority of evangelical churches would say that women should not be pastors. Only 12% of pastors in America are women. And so that's an incredibly low, if you look at like the job markets and even in the very unequal fields like tech is a very unequal field. 25% of the workers in tech are women. So only 12% pastors
you are talking so eloquently and intellectual about the Bible. Where did you go to school to? Because I said this before. He's a former evangelical pastor. So where did you go for Bible school or
I actually went
school?
undergrad to a fundamentalist school called Bob Jones University, which is a very strict fundamentalist school. Like I was raised as an independent fundamental Baptist, so not even like a mainstream evangelical. And after I graduated, I kind of got away from fundamentalism. In fundamentalism, like, the women can't wear pants, like only the King James Bible. Wow. No, even contemporary Christian music, like rock bands on stage was a no-no. It was like all organs and stuff like that. That's what I grew up in. Very, very strict. So I got out of that after I graduated and kind of became a more mainstream evangelical, kind of what you see like worship bands and pastors with, at the time it was skinny jeans, right? And you could have like a tattoo or two and have an occasional beer and that sort of thing. A lot of the same beliefs, honestly, as fundamentalists, especially when it came to men and women and gender roles, a lot of those same beliefs, but better kind of vibes. And so for me, I was a fundamentalist. It felt like a big progressive step to become an evangelical. It disappointed my family, of origin, because they were fundamentalists. My dad is still a fundamentalist pastor. And
because of a lot of evangelicals, I feel, are former businessmen and didn't go to school.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. So seminary, right. Actually, so I didn't get I got undergrad at Bob Jones. I became a pastor before I got my graduate degree. I went to a seminary online while I was pastoring, and I got my master's in ministry. And I'm actually back at school now finishing up my MDiv. So I'm working on a second master's right now.
So do you plan on, I still feel you're preaching in general when I see you on Instagram. There's in the, highest state of preaching of what it's supposed to be. But do you see yourself in the future going back to a church and being a pastor?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I do think I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing right now. And so I have a book coming out this year. And so I'm trying to stay freed up to be able to do a little bit of touring and speaking around that. I'm trying to finish my MDiv, which I went back to get to kind of relaunch, because after I was an evangelical pastor for 8.5 years, and I wanted to step away and get some space from that. And I actually started back in seminary right after I quit, thinking I would immediately kind of go in more progressive direction and pastor again in a more progressive space. But I began to feel like, what am I doing? I kind of was disillusioned completely with the idea of ministry. And then this ministry on Instagram kind of surprised me. And so now I'm like, well, maybe I should. And so I went back to finish it, the MDiv. And so when I finished,
I guess for me, sorry, go ahead, finish.
No, I may look into that, but I just don't know what the future holds, to be honest. I'm very much open right now.
I want you to know that your ministry, and these words, I think we should just start changing these words.
Bless you,
I even said that. I was in therapy yesterday and I was having an issue with the word surrender because it was really, it was like, when I was thinking, I was trying to remember this and my friend said it, they like perverted the word surrender and
especially for queer people and women, like you were meant to kind of surrender your sexuality, surrender your desires, die to yourself, lay those sinful desires at the feet of Jesus and, take up your cross and follow him. And all that kind of language was used to really stifle your ability to be your authentic self.
And yes. And that's why I say these words. I feel they're even doing that with the word masculinity, with the word woke, where I tell people, Jesus said awaken so many times in the Bible, awaken. And he eventually let Peter sleep after 3 times telling him to wake up. I think it was Peter. So what I'm trying to say is when I saw you, as a even adult gay man, I think seeing a straight white man just advocate for myself and my community really brought me a lot of hope and a lot of hope, I think. And that's why I wanted to do the podcast for dads. I feel like you said at the beginning, we have a problem towards men. And do you feel the only way to help that problem with men is for them to see the problem in themselves?
I definitely think, right. So the patriarchy hurts everybody. The patriarchy hurts men. Obviously, the focus of most feminist thinking is around how the patriarchy hurts women and queer people that don't align with heteronormativity and sort of masculine stereotypes. But it also hurts men because, whenever you have an oppressive system, not only the victims of that oppression, but even the oppressors themselves are not free. And in patriarchy, men cannot be their full selves. Look how miserable, even just like little things like this shirt. I don't know. Straight guys are so bad at just like having a personal style. I know this is maybe like a superficial issue. Like this is a small thing. But like straight guys don't feel at liberty to even experiment and put on a fun or fabulous piece of clothing because they don't want to be perceived as a little bit queer. They don't want to be perceived as stepping outside of these very narrow, rigid boxes that we say men are supposed to fit in. They don't show emotions. They don't know how to process these things. The only emotion that a truly masculine man is supposed to show is anger.
And lust.
Lust. And yeah, lust.
And
that's
lust.
a good one.
Anger and lust is definitely, you're allowed to be lustful.
And so we don't let men be real full humans. And so for me, I so love my relationships with women and queer folks. Queer people especially have given me permission to be my full self. Even though I am straight, I think queer people learn earlier in life than many that, hey, you know what? I'm going to have to be me or I'm going to die. Like if I don't ultimately embrace who I really am, and I can't keep conforming to this mold because it so doesn't fit me. And so you learn how to actually listen to yourself and step into your authenticity. Straight men, because the mold is kind of quote unquote built for us, like it's, the mold isn't really built for anybody. Nobody fully fits the mold, but if anybody does, it's the straight white guy. Society was designed for us to be privileged within it. But as a result of that, you don't really feel like you can step out of that mold. It's a straitjacket for people. And it doesn't allow you to be a full human because we were made not to sit at the top of a lonely hierarchy of domination. We were made for community. We were made for relationships. We were made to be vulnerable and to be fully known and loved for the weird humans that we are. And so queer people have given me permission to be free from that.
Makes me feel sad is how did the Bible get distorted and how did Jesus not make you feel free? How does the church twist that to say everything you just said that they teach?
It has less to do with Jesus himself or anything inherent in Christianity or in the Bible, and more to do with the fact that Christianity has become, because of demographics, because it was the majority cultural religion of the colonizers, because it was the religion that they had, it's become a cultural artifact. To be a Christian in America has less to do with imitating the spirituality of Jesus, and it has more to do with a sense of being a part of an in-group and having an out-group. I'm one of the good ones that believes the right religion, and you're not. You're one of the outsiders. So it doesn't have to actually mean that you're deeply imitating the practices of Jesus. Look at pastors don't look anything or act anything like Jesus. I just saw a video. I just put it on my Instagram, actually. Mark Driscoll, he's not a good person, but he's a white evangelical pastor, very, very popular. And he was talking about, he was hating on Catholicism. And he was saying one of the problems with Catholicism is that the priests take vows of celibacy and chastity, or poverty and celibacy. So he was saying, he was just talking about how, that is going to attract weak men because they don't own things. They don't build anything. They're not building families. And like what we need, men look for leaders that know how to build a family and build a business and make money and that sort of thing. And I'm just like, you don't like Jesus at all. He was literally a single homeless person. Like if Jesus came to your church, you'd tell him to get a job and get a haircut. And so his spirituality has nothing to do with deeply imitating the life of Jesus, who was a friend of the poor, a friend of sinners. It has everything to do with just being on top of a system of domination and social hierarchy.
Now, is that in the Bible? Because if I'm not going to out anybody as a Christian nationalist here. I love how that's the new outing if you're a Christian nationalist. But the people I know, for everything you're saying, Brian, they're going to have a scripture to back it up. Boom, yeah. Boom, boom. So outside of their weaponizing scripture, and this might be hard for some people listening to hear, but was that in the Bible? The patriarchy was,
of course,
if that makes sense. Is that all in the Bible that you said?
Patriarchy it precedes the Bible. It came before the Bible. It came after the Bible. The Bible was written in the context of patriarchy. And so, of course, Abraham, we call him a patriarch. The whole religion was, it is a patriarchal religion, as all of them are, as really all of culture has come from patriarchy. That being said, I believe that there are a lot of seeds planted within the Bible that do subvert patriarchy at all kinds of important points. God shows up to Hagar more than to Abraham. Like there are all kinds of these surprising moments where the last becomes first. And that, of course, is made really explicit in the ministry of Jesus Christ. And so while the Bible does have a lot of patriarchy in it, I see the Bible as a pretty complicated, messy book. Everything that happens in the Bible is not supposed to define how we live or our relationship with God. For Christians...
Can you say that again?
Everything in the Bible, I don't remember what I said. It does not have to define our relationship with God or how we live.
We live.
Absolutely.
I think that's, the people that I know, it defines how they live. And so back to the suffering.
Selectively. They would say they believe in one man, one woman for life. That's marriage. Okay. But look at your heroes. Look at Abraham. Polygamous. David, polygamous. Actually the funny thing about them saying the Bible has a clear template for marriage. One man, one woman for life. Okay. Show me a single marriage like that in the Bible that conforms to your evangelical prototype for marriage. There is not a single relationship in the Bible that actually really exemplifies that picture. The closest thing in the Bible to the kind of marriage that they say we're all supposed to have is Priscilla and Aquila in the New Testament. But in that relationship, Priscilla, the woman, is the preacher and the teacher, and Aquila seems to be the husband plays a support role. So actually, even in the one where you see this dynamic straight man, straight woman power couple, even in that one, you have the woman kind of taking more of a lead in ministry. So there isn't really this we've been sold, we've been sold a lot of lies. And I think that the Bible is read selectively by everyone. Everyone picks and chooses when it comes to the Bible.
First of all, there's a character named Priscilla in the Bible.
Yeah, she's a baddie.
I never knew that. Now I'm even more. Okay. Come on, Priscilla now I know where Priscilla Presley got her name from, because that makes my young gay boy so happy that Priscilla is in the Bible. Back to the thing that I feel these men that I know and I've seen change is the suffering. So what caused you to change and leave the church?
So Trump was really like an eye-opening thing for me. I, to my shame, was quite politically neutral prior to Trump's rise.
Mm-hmm.
I was a thoughtless conservative. And by that, I mean that I was a conservative by default because I was raised being told that that was what you had to be. In fundamentalism, I mean, my mom listened to Rush Limbaugh every day, and I was homeschooled, and it was on in the kitchen for 3 hours. Like I listened to all of it, like every day. It was like my mom called it my social studies because I listened to it so much. I did Rush Limbaugh for social studies. Okay,
hey, just so you know, when I was in high school, I subscribed to his newsletter.
I mean,
that's the kind of home I grew up in.
Bathroom toilet reading was his newsletter. Yeah, absolutely. So I was taught that like being a Democrat was evil. Yeah, conservative was the only way. And I just accepted that like the people that raised me didn't lie to me about that. And it really wasn't until 2015. And not that I didn't have any moments of like seeing things like during the Obama year, I'm selling myself a little bit short, but for the most part, I hadn't really deeply wrestled with politics. And then in 2015, as Trump began to rise and like the people in my church were beginning to get behind him, I really realized there was a deep problem that I had not given enough thought and attention to, because I thought that Trump was going to be a joke and really roundly dismissed. But instead, he was quickly elevated, and the very people in my church like were showing support for him. And so I realized there was I was in a different place morally than a lot of the people in the evangelical movement. And so for the next few years, I really wrestled with that, and I tried to preach against it. I saw this rise of Christian nationalism, so I tried to preach the way of Jesus counter to that. But really 2020 was the breaking point for me. I think the pause of COVID just gave me a breath to actually sit with myself and recognize like, I don't belong here. I can't turn this thing around. I'm pissing against the wind. And also my very presence within the system is kind of putting a stamp of approval on something that I cannot approve of. And so in some ways I'm thankful for Trump pulling the wool off of my eyes. He just took the mask off of what, conservative Christianity was, that it's really just about power and cultural power, not about following the way of Jesus. And so that became really apparent with Trump's rise. And so that was what it took for me. And so unfortunately, though, a lot of people see Trump as, we're talking about masculinity. A lot of people see that as like a prototype for what masculinity is supposed to look like. Which is crazy to me.
And what is masculinity supposed to look like in the eyes of Jesus?
Well, Jesus is, I think, a really healthy prototype for that. Jesus.
And what is that?
What is that? Yeah, so I do find it hard to define sometimes these difficult terms like masculinity. But I will say with Jesus, it had nothing to do with domination. Jesus drew near to people. So he had a place of privilege in the sense that he was a rabbi, which is he had a certain level of respect that he would command from people as a Jewish rabbi. And so what did he use that power and privilege that he had what did he use it for? Well, he would eat with people that were thought of as sinners, and that received like he was hated by the religious establishment because of who he included, not who he excluded, not who he dominated, not who he sought to be superior over, but for who he brought in and gathered to himself. And he seemed to pursue relationships of mutuality with people. So I think healthy masculinity, you are using the privilege that you have to lift other people up. You're using the power that you have. Because there is some truth to the fact that, just biologically, a lot of times conservatives will point to the fact that, well, biologically men are stronger, and therefore that makes, that means they're supposed to be aggressive or dominant or these different things. And they do all kinds of weird stuff with that. For me, like, okay, if men tend to be stronger, that all that does is say, use your power for others. That's healthy masculinity. Use whatever power
depends
you
have. Who you're, Simone Biles. I used to be a gymnast, Absolutely. So Simone Biles is pretty strong. So depends on which guy you're talking about.
Absolutely.
So how did it feel for you to leave? Did you feel ostracized by other men?
Well, the whole, I mean, yeah, when I first started posting in public support of the LGBTQ community, I my old church, removed my sermons from the website and that sort of thing. They like sent out a church-wide email about me and that sort of thing. But I don't know that it was like a man-specific thing, although certainly, yeah, it was all men on our eldership team, over there that did do that. I guess I didn't.
Why I say this though is because there's a lot of men I know that are afraid to leave the system,
right,
out of losing friends and being ostracized.
Men tend to value the approval of other men over women, or people that aren't masculine in the way they see. That is true. I see that. I think that that's why, people like Mark Zuckerberg tells Joe Rogan that, corporate culture needs to be more masculine. Like, who is he saying that for? He knows that that's going to piss off women. He's saying that to get the approval of other men. And yeah, I don't know. I guess maybe I've always felt a little outside of that in some ways. Maybe because I was like, I mentioned I was raised fundamentalist. So I always kind of felt like I was a weirdo. I'm from New York City. My dad's a fundamentalist pastor in New York City. And so I was raised like in the middle of New York City, but like as a fundamentalist. And I think that always made me, I had a feeling of being an outsider my whole life. Never really felt like I fit in. And I think that has served me because I think I do. I'm able to maybe feel that and see what that feels like. And even though I recognize that I have a lot of privilege as a straight white guy. And yet I mean, right now I would say that I value my relationships with queer people and women more so than other straight men. If anything, I could use more straight male friends. I find those relationships to be somewhat taxing. It's often difficult to find a good straight man that you can have a good, emotionally honest and like real connection with. Honestly, I don't have.
And Brian, I've heard this. One, that's why I brought you on. And two, I've heard this from a lot of my straight male friends that, I recently had a friend. He was going, he was on with this girl. He loves her and he was emotional with her and open with her. And she ended up breaking his heart. And he was listening to this guy who was telling him he's too nice and he has to be guarded. And I'm like, what? Like, this is, and so there's this sense of loneliness. And I mean, I don't know what to do. I don't think any of us know what to do. I just wish you all could meet up and, because you all are in different states, but I don't know. And I know that, first of all, you all need to be celebrated more. And I think the megaphone has been given to men like Trump, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, and more, and all of you listening, those good men in your life, celebrate them and give them a voice. And I do feel that more men like you are being seen. And that's my hope, that you all kind of come up and, become, I was so happy when Tim Walz, he was chosen, because to me, he's example. A symbol of that.
Yeah, you're right. That I think that, and everybody saw it too. There was a whole discourse about it because there was something refreshing about how soft he was. There was a softness about him that it does seem like so many men are so intent on not appearing to have that kind of warmth and softness, because they're afraid that isn't masculine. But nobody would say that Tim Walz wasn't masculine, right? Just because you're vulnerable. I mean, people have such a twisted idea, I think, some people, of what masculinity is. But when you actually encounter a healthy masculinity, I think it's very attractive. I don't think, and by healthy masculinity, again, I mean that's not rooted in dominance and aggression, but that has the ability to be vulnerable and experience real feelings and emotions. I think that there's beauty there. And you're right. I think there are people that are, I mean, social media, we can all, complain about a lot of the bad sides of it, but it is an opportunity to find and elevate some of those voices. And I have seen some of them out there as well, but it does seem like it's rare in the real world. Yeah. So I don't.
What does
it's sad to see.
how does, again, going back to helping these men, because they listen, they do.
Mhm.
I have friends that have not crossed over. Being a gay man, I meet a lot of men who, maybe they meet me in the corner of a party that are straight and white and feel comfortable with me to talk about, oh, I like your shirt, or I like, because they know I'm not going to judge them. Or even who are, let's say, bisexual and who are exploring that way. Of course, I'm safe for them. But then I see them back with their girlfriend or their wife, or back in this system of, I know someone who loves transgender women and is in a government. He's a government official, or not official. Let me rephrase that. He's not a government official. He works for the government. Let's say that. And his ability to, I asked him, I said, why don't you speak out of, when you're there amongst these people, you can change them. People like you can change people, Brian, not me. I'm the gay Mexican who dances. They know my views, but someone like you can. And he said, I'm afraid, I'm afraid of
That is
being
real.
judged.
I do think there's a lot of fear. And again, I think men have to get to the point where they don't care so much about what other men think, because you will be celebrated by other people too. It's not like when I say these things publicly, and yeah, there are people that hate on me, and most of those people are men, straight men, that'll come in and say, they call me a soy boy. They'll say you're beta. They say these sorts of things. But
I was dating a guy who
people celebrate me. So
I
it's
had
just
never heard.
Oh,
Yeah, sorry. You said that word beta and it triggered me because I had never heard that word. And I was dating this guy and he said that and he was talking negatively. And I was like, that sounds amazing to me. Someone who's a beta. Or, first of all, these are just words. Again, back to those freaking words.
We're not wolves, first of all. Like it's a ridiculous way to think. It's ridiculous.
So
But
how does it,
those traits,
how does it hurt them?
I think they're afraid of losing that privileged position, right? So like Jesus, Jesus ate with sinners, prostitutes, people on the outside. When he did that, the religious establishment, the people who mattered, quote unquote, the people with power, the people with authority, the people with social power, they hated Jesus. They ultimately killed Jesus. And so there is a sense in which it serves you to cater to the powers that be. The people that have privilege and power, if you're trying to please them, then you want to stay on their good side. And that often means ostracizing and playing the same tricks of domination and power plays and hierarchy that they're playing. And so to ultimately say, no, I don't care what you think, I'm going to be this other way, it could piss people off. And so you do have to get to the place where you care more about what people that might be more marginalized think than what people that are more privileged think. And that
and how it's affecting you. How does the page, because you and I both know it doesn't serve them. So how does the patriarchy hurt them emotionally, personally?
Well, like I said, it stunts their ability to be themselves, to be vulnerable, to let themselves be themselves, whatever that looks like, whether it means wearing an interesting, flashy shirt, whether it means, talking in a way that's more comfortable for them, whether it means even being friends with the kinds of people they'd maybe rather connect with, but they feel like maybe they're not supposed to, just being vulnerable with your emotions, having maybe the kind of career or job that would be more suited rather than the one that like society says. There's all kinds of ways that we can stunt ourselves in order to align with the patriarchy. I don't know. I mean, I think part of it is like, yeah, it's hard to change people later in life. I do think that like as dads, like we can tell our kids like it's okay to feel. And I think there's a rise in connected parenting. And I think that's going to be really, really helpful in like honoring our children's feelings and letting them not have to like the way I was raised, a lot of times when I would have an emotional outburst, it was suppressed and I was told to like not feel, right? And so I try to let my kids feel their feelings. And I'm really hopeful that that pays dividends in their ability to be fully, full people and not trapped in a patriarchal box.
And there's going to be a huge, we're already seeing it, resurgence of people trying to confuse you about masculinity, trying to confuse you about feelings, trying to confuse you like you're going to get this. It's going to come hard these next 4 years. So I want people to be reminded, and I have
seeing these billionaires pushing this stuff is really wild because like they have so much power, so much money. And, for Elon Musk, he's got $400 billion. He's the richest man in the history of the world. And he's going around on podcasts talking about the woke mind virus, right? Mm. Going around talking, dead naming his own son, his own child. Sorry.
It's sad.
It's disgusting.
It's sad.
And it's like, so he's got all this money, all this power, and he's using it to really aggressively reinsert patriarchal rigidity. And then like, I think it's, it's really sad seeing people. So anytime, maybe one way to flip it around on people is if you're like some middle-class person and you're like, oh, that's the woke mind virus. It's like, bro, you're like a bootlicker right now to a billionaire. You're literally just swallowing the rhetoric of some rich guy. You're going to let him control you like that with his money. Like, I'm not going to pick up that narrative. And that to me tells me
I'm a big believer
to them.
I'm a big believer that suffering will change these men, and meaning the effects of their own choices. It sounds like that's what happened with you. Even as a gay man, we grow up under straight men. We're affected by the patriarchy, and it can go into the gay culture as well. I mean, if you look at why are gay men collectively, not as much anymore, but so built and so obsessed with the body and form, and they always say, oh, gay men have a lot of money. It's because we're brought under the same system of
right.
And so to break
you
that
weren't
up,
able to be a, again, quote unquote, success under one metric of the patriarchy, which is to, get married in a heterosexual marriage, that sort of thing. So maybe they redirect and say, well, I can be successful under this other metric of the patriarchy and be wealthy or be built or something like that. That makes sense.
I can still be accepted.
Right.
And you know what? That system will never accept me. And I've come to terms with that.
That's really good because I have seen, especially among the white male gays, there's a distancing from the rest of the queer community, almost like we're like straight gays almost. And obviously wouldn't say it that way, but it's almost like they want to have, like you said, the accoutrement of the patriarchy and get as much of that power as they can, get as close to it as they can. But at the end of the day, you're right. They're never going to be seen as whatever it is you're searching for, and much better to just be done with that system and instead strive for mutuality, strive for lifting up the other people around you. That's where we find our rescue ultimately, is in community.
In community. Yeah. And I hope that you all, men similar to you, form more of a community that are similar values. So on the flip side, what has your experience been like? How has it served you leaving the patriarchy?
Well, I mean, being free to make queer friends. I had queer acquaintances when I was an evangelical, but it's pretty hard to be close friends with somebody when you are in a structure that believes that they are going to hell, right? And so I had to really come out of that to be able to have the real authentic relationships that I have. And that has been really beautiful and transformative for me. The majority of my friends when I was an evangelical pastor were other straight white men. That was the majority of my friends, and that's no longer the case. And so that has been good for me. Overall, I think there's some.
Why has it been good? Why has it been good for you?
Well, like I said, I think it's given me permission to be more of myself. It's also good to reckon. I think all of us should reckon with and wrestle with the privileges that we have. I was a part of a system that privileged straight white guys. And coming out of that, there's a loss of privilege, but I'm still in society at large. It's not just the evangelical church that privileges straight white guys. Obviously, that's everywhere. But in coming out of that, I did have to wrestle with that and now reckon with, how am I going to now steward that privilege that I have? And right now I'm trying to use my voice to do exactly, what you caught me doing. And
I probably would say, you're more successful at what you're doing. You're reaching more people now that you're free, correct?
Totally. And I'm so glad that I didn't have a huge public platform when I was an evangelical pastor. I think in some ways I never would have, because I didn't have a real authentic voice then. I was so much censoring myself to the narrative that what I was supposed to believe, And so actually coming out of that and becoming my authentic self, having an authentic voice, I think has freed me up. And you're going to resonate. It is always a gain, no matter what you lose. Here's what I want men to know. No matter what you lose by reckoning with the loss of privilege, you will gain in the joy of authenticity and community. Because being loved for being at the top of a hierarchy is not the same as being loved for being who you are. And
I completely agree.
I think we're so afraid.
And I've seen it.
We're so afraid to lose our position at the top that we allow ourselves to be a shell of who
you said the word joy. You said the word joy. You get the joy of this. You don't see a lot of joy in those men at the top. You see depression. You see sex addiction. You see alcoholism. And I feel those men are more isolated and lonely than you are now that you left, because they really can't share their views with each other.
Absolutely. I mean, pastors have these moral failings all the time, and it turns out they're never who they say they are, And that's not surprising at all, because there's no safety in those systems for you. You can't be yourself. There's no authenticity. It's a punishing environment. And you can claw your way to the top and strive, but it's exhausting. Much better to just be your authentic self and live as a person on equal playing field with other people. In our desire to be on the top, we actually avoid equality in our relationships, which it's scary, because if you're in a mutual relationship, you have to give and take, and you're not just in this dominant, but then you have to actually engage. You have to actually be relational. You have to actually open up your heart to people. And, we haven't maybe taught men some of these relational skills.
So I saw that you do coaching. Can you help men with that and women?
I've pulled back from doing a lot of that since I've restarted my degree. I don't know what the future is. That was me just trying something, because I'm trying to figure out how I'm supposed to make money, and how am I going to use my voice and my platform and my skills. So I haven't done a lot of coaching. The problem is that the men that need this kind of thing are not going to typically get a coach for it, You know what?
You're right. And they're not going to pick up a book and read. So again,
right. Yeah, I will recommend the book.
What book is that?
Let me grab it. The Will to Change by Bell Hooks, Men, Masculinity, and Love.
I love that book.
Yeah, the best book that I know.
Amazing book.
How the Patriarchy Hurts Men, and it's great. It's a great book.
Ironically, a straight man gave me that book, who's hasn't fully left the patriarchy, who unfortunately I don't speak as much to anymore because of that. But he gave me that book. So why are women so? Well, no, let's not even do, because there are dance moms listening right now. To this dad, and I know they're chiming in, because believe it or not, the patriarchy is at dance competitions. It is I mean, sexualizing young girls at such a young age, if you don't think that has to do with dominance, it does. So, meaning with costumes and
Of
with the
course.
way that they're dancing. So, how can we help and support, whether you're a woman or a gay man or transgender? How can we support these straight men and help them to leave this?
I think we need to rehumanize each other, and like just giving people permission to be full humans. I mean, other straight men are probably not going to offer that to them because they we were just socialized to not do that. And uh, I don't know. It's a lot to ask somebody, who's in a less privileged position to maybe, have to coddle a straight man like that. So I'm not saying you got to do this. It's nobody's job to do. But if you're in a relationship with, if there's a straight person you love, just giving them permission to be vulnerable, to be real, to be emotional, to be just reminding yourself that these are human beings just like you. They were socialized in a different way. That a way that gives them a lot of power and privilege in our patriarchal society, but a way that also causes them to have to shrivel up and be almost a shell of a person in our society. And so it is this double-sided coin, the patriarchy. And so have that understanding that, maybe that'll give you some grace when you're like pissed off at a straight guy for doing straight guy stuff. To have some, and again, I'm not asking, oppressed people to have mercy on their oppressors.
I totally understand what you're saying. Oppressed people can have compassion. We can have compassion.
And to see like, oh, I see how this is actually hurting you. And to give them just to remind yourself, this is a full human being who actually does experience emotions, although they maybe haven't been given the same space to express those emotions as other people. And I don't know what that looks like. It depends on the relationship that you have, but to give them space to do that could be surprising to them. And who knows what kind of relationship can come out of that. We grow and we change in relationships, though. I believe that.
I guess I was kind of asking too, because I'm kind of asking the prison. You're not a prisoner anymore, but I'm asking a former prisoner of what they needed in the prison. So that's kind of why I was asking, like, of what helped you during your process.
Friendships were so crucial to me, though. And, after I left pastoring, I moved to Raleigh, and pretty quickly I made a couple friends, a gay dad couple, actually. And even though they knew that I had recently been an evangelical pastor and knew that I had some regressive beliefs that they would have been pretty troubled by, they were so kind to me. And we connected deeply. And that was a really helpful thing for me, to be accepted by them. And I had already begun to, change a lot of my views, especially around LGBT issues. But I still, it was maybe, I didn't have, like I said, previously a bunch of gay friends when I was an evangelical pastor. So being warmly welcomed into a friendship meant a lot. And I was able to be myself, really right off the bat within that relationship. So that was such a beautiful thing, and a gift that they gave me, that gift of friendship.
And I'm sure you healed them, because I know my straight friends that are authentically themselves, emotional, have been there for me. Heal that wound when I was bullied, when I wanted that friendship when I was younger and wasn't able to get it, didn't feel like enough. It's very healing too, which you're giving back to as well. Awesome. So tell me about this quote that you have on your Instagram: be curious, not judgmental.
So I heard that on Ted Lasso. He didn't make it up. Kind of goes back a long ways, although nobody knows who exactly said it first. Somebody said it was Walt Whitman, but I looked into that and it's not true. Doesn't matter who said it. It really, the first time I heard it, it stopped me in my tracks. And I realized that was maybe that at the core of my worldview, and in some ways, a central idea of my spirituality as well. And it just gave me words for it, that we're so quick to put people in boxes, to assume the worst about people. We don't give the benefit of the doubt. We judge. All of us do. Progressives do it just as much as conservatives. Progressives can be incredibly judgmental. It's just a human thing. It's a safety thing. It's a way that we protect ourselves, the way that we narrate our worlds. And I've found that to have a different impulse rather than to judge, but to ask questions, like to just wonder why, has served me so much in all my relationships. I even think of, my parents are still very, very conservative, fundamentalist people, but, and sometimes we can get into it over politics. But, they were here not too long ago, and they said some things that really bothered me about like immigrants at the border. They said some really regressive, judgmental sort of things. And my impulse was to kind of skewer them.
Attack.
Yeah. But instead, I tried to engage curiosity. And it was like, oh, that's interesting that you're afraid of that. Why are you afraid of that? And to try to just peel back some layers of what's the fear beneath this, And what I found was that they had very human fears that I felt were irrational, and they were being targeted at a scapegoat, right? But underneath that, they're really just human beings experiencing fears. And I, instead of fighting, I was able to just ask questions, which I think, listen, it's not a requirement to try to change anybody's mind. It's really hard to change anybody's mind. I don't like to argue people into positions, because I think we don't really change our mind by being argued at anyway. I think that we change our mind in relationships and by being listened to and by feeling heard and understood. And so I think curiosity.
And by showing our pain. So I remember once I was going through a breakup with my mom in the midst of it, in the middle of that, when I already knew where she stood. And I remember my spirit telling me I was brokenhearted like that. I don't know if I'm sure your heart's been broken, Brian. So it was like, I was in the bedroom, crying. And I remember my spirit, Holy Spirit, I call it Holy Spirit, saying, you need to show this to your mom. Wow. You need to go out in that kitchen and don't, wipe up and get clean as good Christians do and walk out and be, John. And, couldn't hold it in, and I was crying in the kitchen making breakfast, and she told me that she realized that it wasn't just in that moment, it wasn't just about sex, because in her mind that's what it was, that it was about this it was a true relationship. We all know the feeling of a broken heart, so right. It can feel scary. Obviously we want to have boundaries and feel safe, but I want to encourage people. Okay, so not that we go ahead.
Well, no, I think that's perfect, man. And
not that evangelicals are enemies either. Not that there are enemies. Okay. We don't want to, and maybe they are. So on that note, with our last question is, if they were our enemies, sometimes in our mind they are, what does loving our enemies look like Jesus said?
Remembering that they're humans. And to not bring the forces of dehumanization against them that they might be using. I don't think that to answer dehumanization with dehumanization doesn't help, right? Like if they're going to treat certain groups like queer people, trans people, immigrants as less than human, then to treat them as less than human in response is not going to bring about the beloved community.
Ooh, that's hard.
Yeah. It is, because how do you remember the humanity of someone who's not remembering your humanity? That's not easy. So I'm not, I think that loving your enemies is a tough one. I think it's a personal journey. The last thing I want to do as someone who might be perceived as like a kind of a pastor, whatever I am, is to tell people that they need to go and love the people that hate them and wounded them, and to put a guilt trip on them for not being more loving to people that actually, don't even see them as full people. I think you've got to get there yourself. And that's between you and God. And so I think we've been like that whole surrender thing, it's like it can be misused. Like, I'm not going to tell you have to surrender fucking anything. Like if you feel Holy Spirit leading you to a place of surrender, that's a beautiful personal spiritual choice. But me manipulating you that you've got to surrender your sexuality or your money or any of that stuff, so many pastors have agendas, right? And so I just want to be cautious with the love your enemy thing. For me, I feel called to treat evangelicals like humans. I critique them a lot. Like I stitch people. And so sometimes
you do, Brian.
I get them. I get they asses. Sometimes people think that maybe I'm a mean guy or something because I do that. I don't find that to be dehumanizing. I think if you're putting something out into the public square, we can have a public disagreement. That's not me hating you. I don't hate Mark Driscoll or whoever these people are that I'm responding to. I hate a lot of their ideas and their rhetoric. I try to, when I have conversations in the comments or whatever, to try to meet people with curiosity. Sometimes, yeah, have I been a jackass before? Sure, I'm not perfect, but I think that being curious towards them is a really important step in loving them, because it's remembering that they're human with their own fears and issues. And as we lean in with curiosity, I think we see things that we can love and empathize with. So yeah,
and maybe loving your enemies is tied into just being curious about them. Yeah. Curious as to why they are the way that they are. And I thank God I've always had this. I don't have a problem with Jesus. I have a problem with his followers, and I get great peace from Jesus's teachings, and I've seen it work in my life. So it would be similar to somebody I trust saying, hey, John, love your enemies. I don't see a man in a suit telling me that on a pulpit. I see, hanging out over a glass of wine saying, and to me, that looks like praying for them. Sometimes that's all you can do. Just praying that they see their wicked ways.
Yeah. It doesn't mean
that
you
can
don't
be love in itself.
I think Martin Luther King Jr., it's his birthday right now, so it's a good time to mention him. I think he's probably our best public example of what enemy love looked like. He used nonviolent resistance, and he was inspired by the way of Jesus and by loving enemies. But that didn't mean calling them to account, calling them to repentance, calling them to change. It meant refusing to dehumanize, refusing to use violence. But yeah, so I think it means not stooping to whatever level of dehumanization that they might be stooping to. That doesn't mean we can't do jokes. I like to be cheeky. I like a joke. I love a meme. I think that sometimes Christians can be kind of humorless, and so I'm not a pastor anymore, thankfully, and so I can be a jackass. I think that's important for us to have a sense of humor. Progressives can sometimes be a joyless bunch because they're so concerned with being right about everything that they're like afraid to be silly. But for me, that's part of my humanity. It's like, let's still like have our silliness about us. And so sometimes that doesn't mean, sometimes we're going to make fun of a conservative or a conservative viewpoint. And I don't think we need to feel guilty about that. Like, oh, am I not loving my enemy? I think you can love somebody and tease them, but I think leaning in with curiosity and not dehumanizing, and that does not mean we don't actively resist. Well,
justice goes along in there too. Justice, Sermon on the Mount, blessed are those who seek justice. So, Absolutely. With that comes everything else that, but I know, again, we all get confused because we've heard someone say, surrender, love your enemies, pray for those that persecute you. We're here to change it up.
I think there is a place, like I don't tell people, boundaries are important and some people need to cut people off. So I'm not saying don't do that. For me, I try for that to be a very last resort. I haven't really had to do that. In all of the relationships where there's now distance, I don't want that distance to be because I've said I don't want anything to do with you. That has always been because people have, they don't really want much to do with me anymore because of where I'm at. And that's fine. But for me, I want to know like that hand of like relationship is continually out for me towards people even who disagree with me on all kinds of things. And so that's something for me though. Again, I wouldn't even put that on somebody else because I think for some people, they're just not in a place mentally where they can do that and they have to protect themselves from certain relationships. Like, especially if you're queer, to be in relationship with someone who doesn't see the humanity in your queerness, that might not be what you should do. But for me, that's part of where I feel like I'm at, is I keep that relational door open. I think we're too quick overall, I think, to cut people off, I feel. But I want to be cautious to not be dogmatic about that.
If you can't see me all, but I'm raising my hand. I did that 15 years ago. I cut off my parents, people close to me. And at the end of the day, it hurt me. I felt a lot of pain, suffering, and I learned through the suffering how to forgive, have boundaries. Some people I think cutting off means I was mentally cutting them off, but the pain was still there. So, cutting off could be, or not cutting someone off could be, I don't talk to them, but I don't wish them badness. Or I've dealt with the stuff that they've done to me. But I think, you said that some people think you're mean. And I think we've seen a silly side of you. I will say, from me, I think the way you are on your Instagram is very masculine, and that can come across as, but that can come across thinking you're going to be like them. Does that make sense?
Oh, interesting.
That's the confusion.
That's how they would approach it. They would approach it with that combativeness. Yeah.
Yes. So like here sitting with you, him and I have never, we've met now, but in the beginning it was like, he's aggressive and he has a point of view. And I could feel a little bit of fear in that. And I think it's coming from someone who is aggressive and has a point of view is masculine and going to hurt me. And that's not the truth. You can have a point of view and use your voice.
Honestly, it's not too bad of a, in terms of a survival strategy, there's worse assumptions to make, but that's a really good point, is maybe there's projection there. You're right. They're projecting. Yeah. So
thank you for that. Thank you for everything that you do. We have a couple end questions. Favorite writer?
Ooh, wow. Well, my favorite book is probably John Steinbeck's East of Eden. Lately, I've been just devouring a lot of Richard Rohr. He's my favorite spiritual writer.
Okay, you just gave me a writer and a book. The next one was favorite book, so you gave me East of Eden. Favorite scripture?
Ooh, Galatians 2:20 is the only one that I have tattooed. Where is it? One of these collarbones. This one. And that's I'm crucified with Christ, nevertheless I live, but not I, but Christ that lives in me. I don't know if it's my favorite, but it definitely highlights for me still the Christian message. And that does mean some different things to me now than it did a few years ago. But
it's on your body
with my ego. And there's parts of myself that always need to die, but never the true self. The true self of Christ in me always comes more and more alive.
What's the boldest thing you have done? One of?
I think resigning from being a pastor and then publicly changing my mind on a host of issues was bold. I'm proud of myself for doing that. It came at definitely some personal cost and has had some surprising benefits, right? Like I grew this Instagram platform. So that's been cool, but I didn't know that was going to happen when I started doing it. The cost came first.
It is bold, and you can follow his boldness. Where can they follow you at?
B.E. Recker, R-E-C-K-E-R, B-E-R-E-C-K-E-R. Is my Instagram handle at @BRecker, B.E. Recker. My middle name is Eugene. That's the E, in case you're wondering. So Brian Eugene.
Oh,
Recker,
okay.
Recker is
hey, all of you listeners in dance, we all know Eugene was in Grease, so we like that. Grease the movie. There's a character Eugene. So
there you go.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being bold. Thank you for being a dad. Thank you for using your voice. I know myself and more in the community are grateful. And also, thank you all for listening and watching Dance Dad with John Corella. Our show comes out every Thursday at 9 a.m. Eastern. You can search for Dance Dad with John Corella on all podcast platforms and make sure to follow it and download it so you don't miss an episode. You can subscribe to Dance Dad with John Corella on YouTube and turn on your notifications so you never miss a bold episode. You can also sign up to become a member on Patreon at The Only Dance Dad with John Corella to watch the on-camera footage and see this great shirt that Brian has on and to be a part of this bold, fierce community. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, John.
Thank you so much for listening to Dance Dad with John Corella. Thank you to everyone at Hivecast for all that you do. And if this episode meant something to you, please share it and subscribe. Also, you can follow Dance Dad with John Corella on all platforms. But most importantly, remember to be bold and be fierce.